Welcome, everyone, to the PS&D Outreach Team's Power Hour. My name is Dirk Foley. I'm an outreach advisor for PS&D. PS&D is an industry leader in the recruitment business matching training with opportunity. We place over 1,400 practitioners every year. And the outreach team was created to assist residents, doctors in training, to meet the challenges and the unknowns of the employment search. I just got back from a national conference in Kansas City, and talking with second and third year residents, it validated what we do here, which is to help demystify and help you prepare to better meet the job search. I'm talking today with Dr. Nii Darko. Dr. Darko, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Nii Darko, Dr. Nii Darko. I am a trauma surgeon by training, and I went ahead and started working officially on my own back in 2012. And I initially started off as a Locum Tenens physician, and then after a year and a half, I decided to become an employed doctor. I did that for about 3 years. Excuse me, everyone. And during that time, I had close to about $700,000 student loan debt between me and my wife. And during those 3 years of being an employed doctor, I also worked locum tenens during that time. And I got an opportunity to start a podcast called Docs Outside the Box, where I interview doctors who, at the time, were doing and thriving in non-traditional areas of medicine. And then we started to sprinkle in some personal finance. How do you pay off your student loan debt? How do you start a business? And now we've kind of continued to grow to where we talk about money, we talk about as well as pop culture, and then we also talk about everything kind of in between that. But now I practice full time as a locum tenens doc, so that means I work at a hospital or a couple of hospitals. I perform trauma surgery, I perform critical care, and then from there I'll work for about 1 to 2 weeks a month, and then from there I head back to my place, which is in New Jersey, and then I'm off for 2 weeks, and then I rinse, wash, and repeat. So I'm pretty excited to be here to share my kind of non-traditional life, from a home life as well as from a practice life, and explain to you guys what's going on. So
we are delighted to have you join us today, Dr. Nii. Thank you for your time. Let's go back in time, if we can, to your days completing your residency training. Tell us a little about how you came to know what it is you wanted to do with your medical career. Actually, should we go back before that and have you talk a little bit about how you found medicine as a career for yourself?
yeah, no problem. So just real quick, everyone, I just got over a cold, so I have a little bit of some, not to give too much, but some postnasal drip, so I cough a little bit. So I apologize if I'm coughing or if it interrupts things. So just want to put it out there. I decided that I wanted to be a doctor. I grew up in the 80s. So from Doogie Howser to, I don't know if people on this in here remember that, but Doogie Howser, The Cosby Show, St. Elsewhere, these were the shows that were really big on TV. And, I just kind of gravitated to that. There wasn't anybody in my family at the time who was in healthcare, but I just realized that, I don't know, there's something about it that was attractive. And then, this is me, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then, as you go into high school, you're like, okay, I think I want to do this, but I'm not sure if I really can do this. And it wasn't until I was 17, the college that I was going to had a pre-matriculation program where you would do about 6 weeks of work on campus before the regular actual school year began in August, September. And it's an easy way to get credits, but to also get acclimated to campus. But at the end of that program, they had this alumni reception where you can meet with folks who went to the school before. And one of them was a trauma surgeon who actually worked in the town or near where I grew up, which is Newark, New Jersey. So I spent literally a couple of days with him. And it was at that moment, after, shadowing him, that I was like, yeah, this is what I really want to do. Not only do I want to do medicine, but I want to operate on people. And I know it's really stressful. I know that, there's going to be times where you feel like, you're kind of underwater and so forth. But I really enjoy the aspect of just helping people in this way. And I really enjoy the ability to interact with families in this way. And then that's kind of the decision that I made early on my first year of college, and then I haven't looked back since. But I'll be really honest with you, throughout the process, I've hit many potholes. I've applied to medical school twice. Um, there was a time where I thought I wasn't going to get into a general surgery residency, but I did. Um, and this is also an opportunity to let people know that, oftentimes the path to becoming a physician is not linear. The path to success a lot of times is not linear, and oftentimes is not the same path as some of your friends, your colleagues, or whoever else that you're following. You just kind of have to just figure it out on your own.
That's very well said. There's really no cookie cutter in this, and each physician's path is going to be unique to them. So you did get through medical school and into a general surgery. You did general surgery and then a trauma subspecialty or trauma fellowship.
Yeah, so I did general surgery for 5 years, and then I switched. Sorry, not switched, but then the next step for me was, excuse me, I went to Miami, University of Miami, and I did a 1-year trauma fellowship there.
Okay, got it. So, in terms of the identification of, and we've talked some about this previously, your identification of how you came to find your first position. Did you have mentors along the way? Who did you talk to? How did those things kind of come about? Zero. Why we're talking. Okay.
Actually, let me just do one. It was my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife,
Okay.
and she's my co-host, Dr. Renee. So so this is 2011, 2012. I'm finishing up in 2012, and a lot of my fellows were doing the usual. Okay, it's getting towards the end of the year. Let me start doing my interviews at these academic places. University of X. University Y, whatever it was. And I just wasn't feeling it for some reason. I don't know why. I just wasn't feeling doing that. And I knew for me, academic medicine wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to publish. I didn't want to do articles. I just wanted to take care of people. At that time, I didn't know how to verbalize that. And I think a lot of people maybe sitting in and watching this kind of know what I'm talking about, where it's just like, yeah, like, this is great. I'm at this academic center. It's amazing. But I don't know if I really want to work like this, right? I don't know if I want to do this. And I think oftentimes we're not able to have mentors who can, let us know that, hey, medicine offers this entire palette or this entire plate of how you may want to practice after you finish residency. I did not get that. Or let's be honest, I didn't feel open and honest with saying, hey, outside of going to another academic institution, can I just go to a community-based hospital and kind of work there? And I didn't know anything about locum, so let's just save that for later on. But, when you are steeped in, an Ivy Tower, or if you're in an academic center, it's really hard to get out advice outside of the walls. But this is 10 years ago. A lot of things have changed since then. Podcasts, blogs, YouTube videos. And I think just in general, I think people or medicine is a lot more open to different traditional or non-traditional ways of practicing. But back to that story back in 2012, my girlfriend at the time, she said, listen, why don't you consider locums? And I was like, what's locum? She's like, yeah, you kind of work for a hospital, but you don't really work for the hospital. And I was like, what's that? What are you talking about? I don't know. What is all this? Yeah, they pay for your flights, and, they pay for your medical malpractice, and then you just practice. And then you kind of decide if you want to work there or if you don't want to work there. I was like, what? And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. And she said, why not? I was like, well, because the other fellows aren't doing it. Which, when you think about it, like, at the time I'm 32, 33 years old, like, that's probably the dumbest reason not to do something, right? Because someone else is not doing it. So I went on several interviews, and I found out that, excuse me, guys. I found out that it was getting really difficult to, go on these great interviews. And at the end of these interviews for 5 hours, they have jazz hands and everything. Like, this is great. You guys, you need to come here. You'll do X, Y, and Z. This place is really busy, blah, 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 blah. Here, sign here, and this is a contract for 5 years. And I don't know, maybe I have commitment issues or something, but I just said, yeah, I don't want to do that. So I did locums for a year and a half, and I really got a chance to see trauma in different ways. Trauma as private practice, which is, not very common, but it was interesting. See trauma, in an academic center, which is something that I just came from, and to see trauma at a community-based center, which is what I really liked. And I did that for about a year and a half, and it was great. I stayed with my parents. My dad at the time had prostate cancer, so he's fine. But it really felt amazing to, be able to pay his bills. That was like one of the most amazing feelings ever. To be like, Dad, I got this. I wasn't very diligent with, saving my money in the smartest way because of IRS issues and so forth, but I got that taken care of. But just want people to know that there was, in 2011, there really wasn't a manual on how to do these things. I was just kind of figuring it out. And it's funny, when I left and I started doing this lifestyle, a lot of my attendings were like, what's this like locum stuff? Man, go work at this hospital or go work at this academic center and call it a day. Why are you doing this to your career? It's funny. Fast forward 10 years, 2 of those guys have already called me saying, hey, this locum tenens thing that you were talking about 10 years ago? Can you teach me about this? Because I'm thinking about doing this. I want to start this and do this and stuff. And it's like, here's my moment to stick it in your face. But I'm not. But it is hilarious, right? Because oftentimes you'll get advice from people who will tell you something and they don't know much about it. So sometimes you have to take the advice that you get with a grain of salt. You have to be able to hopefully get multiple mentors and multiple people from different walks of life who can give you some advice. But that's my story in a nutshell.
Nice. We chatted also before. The awareness I had coming out of that national conference was that physicians, both in medical school and through residency, train under someone. You're reporting to someone, and so this reflex of the behavior of reporting to, and then all of a sudden you're at that point where you're graduating, you're board certified, and you are behind the steering wheel of your own practice. And it's a huge mental shift that physicians make at that time. Tell us a little about how that transition happened for you.
I'm still making that transition, right? So nobody prepares you for that. This is the part where I always get real with people. Nobody prepares you for life as an attending properly. I don't know the way in which we currently train residents, if you can prepare residents for life as it is, because residency is this made up world. It's a microcosm. You literally have to learn as much as you can for your residency, be able to pass at the end of those years, be able to pass a board examination, and then they kind of let you go. But the way in which you practice looks nothing like how you practice as a resident, right? Like there's nobody keeping track of your hours as an attending in comparison to when you were a resident. There's nobody who's watching how you're educating yourself as an attending in comparison to residency. And there's nobody really to kind of help you kind of stand up for yourself and figure out certain things as an attending like there was, or maybe you can watch your upper levels or people ahead of you when you are in residency. So it's a big difference and it's a big change. But I think the number one key to understand is just the word that I said is you have the keys. This is like you have the Ferrari now. You have the Lamborghini, so to speak. You've been kind of washing it. And when you drive it, as a resident, your attending is in the passenger seat, so to speak. And, you're spinning and all that stuff. And then when residency comes, you get to kick that attending out. Yo, get out. Now it's my turn. And you get to spin the wheels and burn the rubber and try to figure out how you're going to practice as an attending. What kind of things you want from a practice standpoint. Right. And what I mean by that from a practice standpoint is how many hours you want to work, how many patients you want to see, how you want to get paid, how many weekends you want to do. Right. Do you want to be one FTE versus, half a FTE? Like, do you want to be a full-time? All of these things are all available to you. But I think nobody kind of really talks to us to say, hey, all of these options now have just been unlocked. Like all of these cheat codes have just been unlocked. You need to go ahead and use it. And I think it took me about a good 3 or 4 years to realize, I was like, wait, I can do this, I can do that. And someone was like, yeah, bro, like you're 3 years out of residency. You didn't know this? Like you can do this. You can determine when you want to work. You can determine, what you say yes to. And that was a big mind shift change for me, was changing my mindset from a resident and actually kind of trying to please someone or, practicing to make sure that, I'm staying under the radar, as opposed to just kind of just flapping my wings and really understanding that, oh wow, like I run this, like this is, my career. My career is not going to look like anybody else's, and it shouldn't. And also at the same time, I need to be very intentional as to how I'm going to practice. And I think that that's the whole point of my show, is kind of to let people know, hey, listen, this is what I did. This is what all these other folks do. Go ahead and consider this. I think that's also the point of, provider solutions and developments, to let people know, like, hey, if you're looking for a job, did you think about X? Did you think about Y? Did you think about part-time? Did you think about this? Like, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's, I can make those decisions. Like, yeah, it's like, in Coming to America with Eddie Murphy, it's like, whatever you like, guys, you make the decisions. So a lot of times I make jokes, but I think sometimes when you like say something that's very stark and funny, like it really brings people down to, oh, it's that simple. And it's like, yeah, it's really that simple. You make your own decisions.
So did you, and not to tell the truth on yourself too much, but did you make any mistakes in retrospect, looking back, things you would have said, I wish I hadn't, or I could have done something?
One, too deferential, right? And that's either too deferential to my partners, or too deferential to the hospital. And two, I think too trusting, so to speak. Like, oh, if a contract says X, Y, and Z, they can't really mean that, right? So, for example, with a contract, my first contract said that any money or anything that I did outside of the hospital and that I got money from, that was related to me doing anything related to me being a physician, the hospital could get money from that. And I was like, oh, this is not real. Like, this is a mistake. This is a relic. I don't know, whatever it is, like, how are they going to know? And nothing ever happened from it. But I had an actual one of my co-residents who graduated, he was out in Las Vegas. His said the same exact thing. And he was doing locum tenens on the side as well as being employed. Well, that hospital eventually got wind of it and said, hey, like, you owe us like a certain amount of money because you weren't supposed to be working, or if you were supposed to be working as an independent contractor or doing something on the side, you're supposed to let us know. And since we can't ever really know like the exact amount that you got, how about we settle this for $100,000? Excuse me, what? Right? Right? It's just like, well, for me, I'd lie and be like, well, I was working at McDonald's or something like that, right? Like, here's $50. This is what you're gonna get from me. But all jokes aside, like, these are the things that you think you're not exposed to as a resident, and then when you have to make these decisions, you're like, well, I don't really want to make a decision about this, so I know they can't be serious. Let me move on. And it's like, no, that's not true. Actually, there's a reason why it's in the contract, right? Whatever the contract says is whatever goes. So that was really important. But going back to the number one, the deferential, you have to remember that when you go to a practice, whether it's private or you go to and join a group, if you're coming out of residency, more than likely, from an academic standpoint, from a study standpoint, you're fresh out of training. You actually know more from a practice standpoint than a lot of your colleagues. A lot of your colleagues have the life skills. They may have the skills that can get them out of certain, surgical emergencies or medical issues from a clinical standpoint. But like what's the up-to-date standard of care for a lot of things that are going on in your specialty. So you bring a whole set of knowledge that's really worth it. And I think, I definitely did. I came in thinking that I was like a junior, like I was coming off the bench or something like that. And, there was a lot of therapies and a lot of treatments that I would present to my partners. And because, they were 10 years in or 20 years deep, I kind of just shrank at that moment and not kind of stood up for myself. And I think that resonated with, how people thought of me as, am I confident? Do I know what I'm talking about? Which later led to imposter syndrome. Now, it took me some time. I kicked that from the curb. I don't care about that stuff anymore. And it takes time. But that's really important because that determines how you advocate for yourself. If you can't advocate for yourself, then you can't advocate for a patient. You damn sure can't advocate against the hospital. You can't advocate with your partners. Like, these are all really big, important life skills that they don't tell us about. So when I speak these mistakes that I made, these are really things that relate not just to me, but can relate to you and how you effectively take care of your patients.
That's very well said. I wanted to circle back onto the contract issue because you and I, it's not that we had a difference of opinion, but we I want to counsel the people coming in about contract review, like getting an attorney to review your contract. You were an advocate of getting that done. I think sometimes with larger systems, their contracts are written a certain way. And of course, attorneys do what they do. They want to write language that they understand. And only so many changes might be possible. So do you recommend that folks have that contract reviewed, at least for understanding?
Yes, I think everybody should get the contract review. And I know that people are going to groan and say it's going to cost money, but I do believe that this this contract actually supersedes what you do clinically, if you know what I mean, right? Like what that contract says has really, for the most part, not much bearing on what you do in the operating room or what much bearing you do with how you take care of patients. It determines how you interact with your patients from a business standpoint, excuse me, from a Medicare, Medicaid standpoint, and also ultimately from a patient outcome standpoint. And if you can't understand what the contract lingo language is, then there's going to be miscommunication, misunderstanding between you and the metrics that maybe you and the hospital are trying to meet, or whoever is the systems leader that you're trying to meet, or maybe even some of your partners. So for me, I always get my contract reviewed. It's anywhere between, I think the average is anywhere between, I'd say about $500 to, depending on how much negotiating you want the lawyer to do, not outside of just reviewing your contract, but also negotiating with a hospital, to like $2,000, $3,000 possibly. But if you think about what that lawyer could bring to you. So let's start all the way from the beginning of working with a large system where there's not much room. Great. Granted, let's say there's not much room where things can be changed. Oftentimes these hospital systems will say, well, we have a standard contract, and it's the same contract for a neurosurgeon that it is for a cardiothoracic surgeon, than it is for a trauma surgeon, than it is for a family medicine doctor. But it's really important for you to understand how you can get in the contract and how you can get out of a contract. That is extremely important. And I think sometimes even just reading all of the legalese, it's so foreign and different than the medicalese that we've learned, you know, in medical school and residency. And I think it's worth it at least to spend a certain multitude or a certain amount of how much you're going to pay if it's going to possibly get you X amount or exponential amount of dollars in your salary. So just even understanding, okay, how do I get out of this contract? And if someone can tell you that, I think that's very important. Or what happens if the hospital makes a mistake? Or what happens when you make a mistake? Or what happens if just life happens? These are the things that are very important to understand. That's at the baseline. I think it's important. Then the second part is well, what if I understand that I want someone to review my contract, but also at the same time, I don't have the time. I don't have the confidence. I conflate my self-worth with my self-value, which means that if I went into a negotiations, it might be a contentious situation. And, in residency, I never was taught to kind of stand up for myself. Who stands up for themselves and says that I want more of a salary as a resident? As an attending, you get to do that. Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me now on this?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So that doesn't occur when you become an attending. Like there's no, as we're talking, that transition or that, you don't get taught that. So I think it's important for people who are saying, yeah, like I do want to change maybe the ability to have a restrictive covenant in my contract. I do want to be able to change and ask for more of a salary. Maybe I just want to work part-time, but I don't know how to ask for that. Rather than just say, well, let me just sign the contract and just kind of we'll figure it out. Being able to pay someone who can actually speak on your behalf and effectively communicate in a non-confrontational manner, or in a manner that if it comes uncomfortable, you can always just say, hey, that was my lawyer. That wasn't me, right? Like these are the things that you can use to make sure that you really understand your contract or get what you really should be getting, commensurate to maybe someone else who knows how to ask, which leads me with women, right? Oftentimes statistically women, their first job from a medical standpoint in comparison to men, the pay gap is really wide. And then as you go years into the career, right? As you go years into the career, 10, 20 years into the career, it gets closer and closer, but it never actually completely merges, right? For the most part, when you do the studies. And there's a study from Health Affairs that showed that when you compare, on average, a woman's medical career with a man's medical career, we're talking about the end of 10, 20 years, a $2 million difference, right? Like that $2 million is the ability to retire at 55, as opposed to 65. Or that's the ability to send a child with no problems to whatever school they want to go to. Or that's the ability to say, you know what, maybe I want to go to a different country and go practice in a third world country. Like this money makes a difference in people's lives. So I really think it's important, particularly for people who are not used to being in situations where they, have all the cards, to oftentimes, rely on someone else. It's okay to ask someone else, particularly a lawyer, to say, hey, can you review this contract? And is this a legit contract? Is it on the up and up? Am I getting what I deserve based off of my training and so forth? And then the next step is, if I want to ask for something else and I may not feel comfortable, can you do that also? You could do it yourself if you want to, but that option is available. So that's my thought on it. So sorry if I made it
No,
a little too long.
I very much appreciate you going into that, because I continue to learn. Um, and I think it's great to know that there are attorneys out there, and certainly attorneys that are familiar with the healthcare system, that can advocate on behalf of physicians who may or may not have yet the musculature to stand in your personal authority, as you're saying, and ask for what you want for your career. Speaking of, you talk about the transition. Talk a little, Doctor, if you would, about the transition, like your closing days of residency, graduation, and beginning that, like maybe the first 3-6 months of your job. How was that for you?
I'll tell you right now, the first day I remember, it was August. I think it was like the first week in August. I remember the first patient I had, and the patient's sticker had the patient's name, their date of birth, and then it also had my name on there as the attending. And that was one of the proudest days of my life. Like, I literally kept the sticker on my scrubs and everything. I was like, wait, I'm the one who's making the decisions. Like, I'm the one who can get sued. Like, this is amazing, right? Like, all the like all the responsibility really is on me, right? That's when you're really responsible. And it was great. But I think my residency really, this is Morehouse School of Medicine. They really trained me to really look at medicine on the whole, right? So Morehouse is a historically black college and university, and we practiced at Grady Memorial Hospital, which is one of the largest institutions in the country that treats indigent populations. And then I also went to University of Miami, which is at Jackson Memorial Hospital, which is another large institution that teaches indigent populations. So the number one thing that they teach you is advocacy. Like, you have to be able to push for these patients because, you're the last bastion. Oftentimes they don't have insurance. Like, you're the person who's going to be able to determine if, they get the proper surgery, if they get the proper care, if they can afford X, if they go into bankruptcy. Like, you are the person who has to be able to do that. So, a lot of my first 3 months, I think, was just kind of just realizing that I had the ability to do that, and that was really important, no matter where I was practicing. That was very important. But I think also just as important, I had a hard time. I'll tell you this right now. I had a hard time realizing, like, my time was my time. Like, it was my own time. And I think that it wasn't until years later that I realized that I had to be a little bit more balanced with how I practiced, with how much time I was spending at the hospital, how much time I was operating, and how much time I was with family, and even just for myself, physical health and so forth. So I think that I don't think I'm alone in that. And that you spend a significant amount of time in residency, just really just sacrificing everything to make sure that you get through. Like, you have to get through, right? And it takes a while to transition out of that mindset. And I oftentimes say it's more of like a scarcity mindset, where you feel like something is going to be taken away from you if you don't do, A, B, C, D. Whereas once you finish that mindset, once you finish residency, it's really a world of abundance, really, so to speak. Like, why can't you do A? Why can't you do B? Like, why can't I practice here? Why can't we do this? And there's certain things that you don't have to accept, I think, once you become an attending. You just have to make it happen. that was really difficult for me to understand. But I think I've gotten a lot better at that. It takes time. I think some people are naturally better at it than others. The key thing is that you change, and that's what I've been able to do.
Hey, can I ask you a question quick? I've been
Of
thinking,
course.
took you back to, right when you were finishing in your first 3 months on your job, but I want to take you back to your final year of training. And just did you even know where to start in the job search? I mean, I know your wife pushed you to look at locums, but were you served up any like resources about timelines or what compensation looks like? Or I just, we hear over and over, and it's half the reason, well, I guess it is the reason we exist, is to try to help bridge that gap. But was that true for you, that those resources just weren't really a thing?
No, no. So it basically was, hey guys, our program director. Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry if I have to cough. Our program director. Our program director would just say, hey, you guys are getting, it's getting to the point where 2012 is coming. You guys are gonna be leaving out of here in 6 months. Let's start looking for jobs and so forth. Let me start making some connections for you guys. Or, you would go to the job board for your respective specialty. So for me, it was East, right, which is the largest organization, I think, for trauma surgeons, particularly young trauma surgeons, and they have this really robust job board online. And then they have some other places, but I really did not. I didn't know that was different than going with someone like you guys, like Provider Solutions and Development. I had no clue. I just would go there, and there would be a job posting, and then I would just apply. I would send my CV, and I edited it the best I could, and then we just start the process of talking and discussing. And I go on an interview, and if they like me, great. If I like them, yes, and then they would send me a contract, and that was it. So in terms of navigating, in terms of education, yeah, we all kind of jumped off a cliff and kind of built a parachute as we were going down and figured it out.
Yeah, I know when we were talking a couple weeks ago, it was interesting that just even the difference between working with a recruiter that's employed by a health system and working for one that's not, and sort of what to expect, and the differences in that. You were talking about your contract. How did you sort of know if your contract was competitive? I mean, did you all kind of sit around and say, well, how much do they offer you, or what was available to you as far as just even understanding that what you were seeing was in the ballpark?
So that's a really good question, right? So I have to be honest. I had two shots at this.
Yeah.
Right as right as I was finishing fellowship. Remember, I went on those interviews, and
Yep.
then I just said, to heck with this. Let's just go and do locums. And then we started picking up again at that point after locums. But at that point, I already knew which hospital I really wanted to work with. And so before I did locums, I kind of got these contracts. I didn't understand the terms. I didn't understand how much I was getting paid. I just knew that, for the most part, outside of working outside of Sports Authority and CompUSA at the time, like, this was my first real job, right? So I'm like, I'm making how much, right? But I didn't, look at the comparison of what my partners would be making or what my other colleagues. We didn't share numbers like that. As a matter of fact, it probably still goes on right now. People don't talk about their numbers just because of, I don't know, just don't want to share those numbers. Which I think is a mistake, actually. I think we should be sharing our numbers publicly. But, the second time around, I just know that locums really helped me to understand how much I was worth, because I really got a chance to understand, wait, if you're willing to pay me in an emergency or pay me in a temporary manner in this fashion, then how much are you willing to pay me as a salary doc? So when it came down to negotiating, I was like, wait, this is how much I was working at this hospital for, although I wasn't working as an employee, but this is how much I was working here for. And now you're meaning to tell me that I'm going to take this dramatic of a drop? No, I'm not going to do that. So I kind of knew the floor at which I wanted to go at the second time around. I also knew what I wanted versus what I didn't want by this time, because now I'm like a year and a half in, almost 2 years in. So I felt a lot more confident with navigating what I wanted in a contract and what I wanted out. But I still think that at the time I didn't think about it. I was like, oh, wait, it wasn't until you brought it up to me that I was like, oh wow, like, I really was contacting the hospital's recruiters and working directly with them, and I never really had my own, recruiter, someone who was kind of at bat for me. I didn't think about that until you mentioned that. And, I think looking back, like I could have been a little bit better at understanding, okay, well, trauma surgeons in the Northeast get A and trauma surgeons in the South get B, or, this is what a standard contract may look like, or how do you want to practice? Like, these are the conversations I did not have at all. So I think that's the power of working with you guys, is you get to take your residents, or you get to take anybody who's leaving their practice through some, very difficult questions, but much needed questions, those come to Jesus type questions and answers where they have to answer it and really kind of understand what exactly do they want and what they don't want, so that when they go and get presented to a hospital, it's a very straightforward conversation as opposed to dilly-dallying and then deciding not to take action.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Obviously, the locums lifestyle is not feasible for everybody, right? Being on the road that much, but I think the knowledge that you gained and what you're hitting on is that by doing that, you were able to try on different sizes of things to see what fits best, right? But I think what we try to help with too is empowering people to know what questions you can ask. If you can't try it out, trial by fire, here's sort of a list of things that you should ask. And frankly, by asking them and being prepared to do so, you're a more appealing candidate because you've thought through a lot of the things that really are gonna, make you stick in a particular position. So yeah, I think that's such a miss to just not have been given sort of those tools to know what you should and shouldn't be asking or advocating for. But thanks for that.
Real quick, like what you said about asking questions, like just saying, hey, can I get more of a salary, or can I get like student loan payback,
Totally.
or can I get a little bit more vacation? Like, you'd be surprised just asking how much that will do for you.
Yep.
But, in residency, you're just trying to survive, right? And so you think that if you ask a question, you're going to be looked at as the other, or you're going to be looked at as someone who's not focused. And that's the thing that I think when you're thinking about what happens during your first 3 months, when you're actually on the other side, you start to look back and you're like, oh, wow, like, actually, if I ask, I get more, or, the squeaky wheel does get the attention. And I think working with someone who's not with the hospital, right? This is not an adversarial relationship, but it's just being real, like working with someone who's not, connected with the hospital, like, so to speak, and working with someone who's has your back, right? And that could be both, but having someone who's having your back in a situation can ask you questions and think about things that, you may not necessarily get if you do it on your own.
Yeah. And I think, PS&D, obviously we do both, right? So I and recruiters, you'll get a feel for that. I mean, I think many of them can sort of be your adventure guide in a way, right? Where you can try out some of those questions on the recruiter and then, have them sort of help you be more prepared for meeting with the hiring manager or medical director, whomever is next. But yeah, I think use a recruiter for that. I mean, the in-house or not. I mean, I think that really a good recruiter is your advocate and can really kind of help you as you are trying to navigate what you should and shouldn't do, or how a question may or may not be perceived and that kind of thing. So yeah, it lots of different things to think about for sure.
Yeah.
I did drop into the chat for those who are on the call the link to our GME Resource Lounge. We have a self-assessment and a personal and a career assessment tool there that, again, as Dr. Nii is talking about, asking yourself the kinds of questions to know what you want out of a job and just to get the wheels turning for you on your unique path into medicine that's there. Doctor, anything for our audience of additional counsel? I mean, it sounds like you have had the opportunity through the locums to learn some things about what you wanted and refine that. Ideally, I would love to be able to spare people that time to have them come out of residency empowered and take on that first job and have it be the match made in heaven for both the system that they're working for, or the clinic they're working for, and the physician themselves, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think that for me, I always tell people, look, like my life and my wife's life, she's OB also. Like we're atypical, right? Where we kind of thrive on doing things a little bit differently than most other people, right? And that's the reason why we took the path that we took. But it doesn't mean that you still can't be intentional to going into academic medicine, or you can't be intentional going into community-based medicine. So I think that I tell folks is just realize that you have a bunch of options available to you, and that asking a question should is not going to be looked up. It's not going to be a negative on you. I just be very honest, and I tell folks this: be okay with asking questions, and be okay with realizing that there's not going to be much consequence to that. Actually, the consequence comes from not asking those questions. The next thing I also tell people is to really embrace virtual mentorship. Like now it's 2022. There are people who have podcasts. There are people who have YouTube. There are folks like you guys, Provider Solutions and Development, that have this GME area where you can go and learn about compensation, which I didn't know anything about before, right? There's so many different resources that are there. You can learn about personal finance. You can learn about the pay gap between women and men. You can go on YouTube videos and kind of learn this stuff. The most important thing is just to continue to ask questions and to realize that, you know what, when you're transitioning from becoming a resident to practicing on your own, that it really is, you are given the keys to, whatever sports car you want to think about it. And it's really up to you to decide how you are going to drive that car, how you are going to brake that car, how you're going to, get you to the final destination, which, we've all wanted to get to, which is, practicing on our own. And that's going to look different. That path is going to look different. Some people are going to hit potholes and so forth, and that's okay. But there are resources along the way to make sure that you're getting the full extent out of your career. And I think that's what we all want right now is, how do I make sure I maximize everything that I can do? Like I trained so hard for a certain amount of years now. How do I make sure that I maximize and become as efficient as possible with how I take care of patients and the relationship that I have with the hospital, the relationship that I have with my community, as well as myself? And, that's how I live my life now. That's how the point of the podcast. And, I'm really excited that, I've been invited to come here and kind of, talk my truth, as non-traditional as it is. But that's how I really carry my life, me and my wife.
I think that the car analogy, we have been playing on this so much since Dirk first mentioned this like passenger seat to driver seat idea, but also sort of taking some comfort in the fact that maybe just because you bought a, Porsche the first time around doesn't mean you can't sell it in a couple of years and buy, a hybrid, right? I mean, so you can definitely, whatever you choose right out of the gates doesn't have to be what you do forever, but it should be that what you choose, you really like it, regardless of what it is, that you really like it for that period of your life and you're learning something about it, but that not to get too sort of caught up in what this will look like forever. But to that point, then make sure your contract reflects that you're not signing on to be there for 10 years or whatever it may be. But yeah.
That's a great point.
So I want to open this up to anyone in the audience if they may have specific questions at this point. We've got about 15 minutes left, 14 minutes or so. So whether in the chat, we will be monitoring that, or just come off mute and ask Dr. Nii your questions.
Question you guys can think of.
Where are the best places to start to look for different jobs?
You want me to
So I think,
yeah,
I think, one of the best places, I think the easiest place, or the place that you'll probably be given from your attendings, and maybe even some of your colleagues, is you'll see that they will, if you go for your respective like specialty board or specialty website. So for me, like it's not the American College of Surgeons, but for example, something like the American Trauma Society or East. But whatever specialty you are, they usually have like a job board where you can go and look for jobs. I think that's the easiest way that people will tell you to start. I actually think the easiest way, if I were to do this again, is I would connect with Provider Solutions and Development. I would connect with an organization like this and actually tell them and have a conversation about where I want to practice, my experience, what type of salary I'm looking for, and kind of just find out like where, geographically, what type of practice style that I would want, because these are the type of questions that I just never got answered. And as a result, I think it makes it a lot easier. They do the work for you. They make you have those type of questions and answer to help you have like the best type of, I think, to have the best type of experience when you're looking for a position. And also, I didn't understand the timelines. Like, those are the things that, where were you guys like 10 years ago? Come on. But like, I'm teasing. But like, if that was the case for me, I think I would be a lot more diligent in the timing that I applied, and some of the things that I need to look out for as opposed to making those mistakes. So I think that's the easiest way. I think that's the easiest answer you're going to get, is to go to your job board. I think the most comprehensive way is to connect with an organization, a company like, Provider Solutions and Development, and have those conversations so that you can understand your timeline. You can understand what's the lay of the land. You can understand, the type of practice style that you may be looking for, and really have like a holistic experience where they're taking you from, getting to know you to all the way to, probably contacting you multiple times and letting you know about this company or this hospital wants to get in touch with you, and go from there.
Yeah. To kind of back on that, there's, sort of endless job boards that are available for positions. So you can create a profile and start getting emails, getting frankly bombarded by people about the jobs that they're recruiting for. So you can do it that way. To Dr. Nii's point, if you know what hospital system you want to work for, or if you know what town you want to practice in, you could, go directly to their website and apply and kind of start working that angle. Or, the value that we bring is that we recruit for some hospitals, not all of them, but we would be able to kind of tee you up and say, hey, based on what you want to do, you should start looking now. And we can either connect you with folks that we work with, or we can try to make connections on your behalf. So yeah, there's several ways to do that. But if you go to those job boards, just be prepared. You're going to start getting a lot of emails from people, because physician recruitment is tough. So
Had another question in the chat regarding paying student loans, specifically the 10-year PSLF, if you're being offered a position through a private company.
This is a good question. So basically, PSLF, guys, is the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program. Basically, you work 10 years at a nonprofit hospital, you make a certain amount of payments consecutively, and at the end of 10 years, like, your debt is forgiven, right? Which is a great program. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. But if you work for a private company, you may not qualify for this program. So this is a really good point. So if you decide that you want to work for a private company, then the options that you have are, follow the standard payback options of your student loan company, right? So that may be a 10-year, or no, I think it's more like a 15-year, possibly a 20-year payback plan. Or just say, hey, I'm going to pay it off really early. Or you could negotiate, right? You can hook up with a lawyer, or you can possibly negotiate getting some student loan payments made on your behalf, with the company. But basically just getting student loan payments, for maybe a year or 2 years or what have you, that you complete with this company, right? So those are the three options, I think. One, pay off with the standard payment that they tell you to do. That's really expensive though, right? Because if you put into a normal like calculator and you put into payments and you put into interest and you put into years, oftentimes you end up paying like double, right? So between me and my wife, we had $700,000 in debt. If we followed the payment plan, by the time we were done, we would have $1.2 million that we would have paid towards our student loan debt. And I don't care what anybody says, but I don't think my medical degree and hers combined was worth that much. We just didn't think so. We didn't want to pay that much, right? So that's one thing that you have to consider. But your loans will be paid off at the end. The second thing is having a discussion and saying, hey, is there any way that you guys can contribute $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 maybe per year or after several years of me working in this, working with this company? And I think that that's worth having that conversation and bringing it up, even if it means you taking less of a salary, even if it means taking or exchanging it for a bonus, right? Where, they say, we'll give you, I don't know, $5,000 bonus or $10,000 bonus. It might be worth it just to be like, yeah, I don't want to take any of that. Just pay off my student loans for this amount, right? It's worth having that conversation. And then last but not least is just saying, you know what? I'm going to work for this private company, but I'm going to pay off my student loans in less time than whatever the standard rate is. That's what me and my wife did. So we didn't work for a private company. We worked for a hospital that was a nonprofit. But because we're old heads, we didn't qualify for PSLF. But we paid off our debt in 3 years because we're immigrants, or we come from an immigrant family, and we don't like debt. I didn't want to be away from my family. She didn't want to be away from her family. And there was just a lot of things that, from an emotional standpoint, having all of this debt didn't seem right to us. And we paid it off. So I think those are the three options you have when you are going to work with a private company.
We talked about attorneys and contracts. We didn't get into accountants and debt payments and that sort of stuff, which is a whole other ball of wax. But again, going to personal priorities about, there are a number of options out there. Thank you for the question. So any other questions from our audience?
These are good questions.
Yeah, I'll also offer on that PSLF and just the student loan repayment ball of wax, as Dirk said. There's another one of our partners, Navigate Student Loans. Their company will do, I think she does like a free 10-minute phone call to just sort of hear you out and help you plan both either for the PSLF scenario to make sure that you're doing it correctly, so you actually do get them forgiven at the end of 10 years, which unfortunately was not all that common in the beginning of that, or how to set up a payment plan, that you can sort of afford and that allows you to pay things off as quickly as possible. So I would check them out. They're a fantastic resource. But the PSLF is an awesome option if you're going to go nonprofit, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get to, thank you for bringing Navigate in here.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get their website just to close that in the chat too.
Anything else? Thanks, sir.
Any other questions? Dr. Nii Darko of Docs Outside the Box, thank you so much for your time today. Hope your cold gets better soon. Really appreciate the work you're doing in sharing your insights in this pathway that you have carved for yourself, your wife as well, in the folks who are coming down the pike, ideally better preparing them. To that end, the outreach team was created to help residents make that transition from residency into your first job more powerfully. We are at outreach@psdconnect.org. You can schedule time with a counselor there, a coach, myself. We do CV reviews, cover letter reviews, all kinds of support for residents. So if you've got questions, we can find answers for you. We hope you'll check us out.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Contact information there. Okay, do I see any other questions? No.
Nope.
Well, this was a lot of fun, and for the residents who are on here or the doctors who are on here, you guys have already gotten past like half the battle right there. Like just getting this information and deciding to take action or non-action, doesn't matter. Just getting this information so that you know what options are available to you is you're going to be way ahead. And just one thing is, I just share with everybody, just make sure you share this information with your fellow colleagues. Let them know the options that are available to them, because I think when we all are knowledgeable, I think we make medicine better. make our residents better. We ask better questions. And I think overall we make the experience as well as the work, the job work experience better for all physicians also. So just make sure you share that information with people.
Absolutely. What a perfect note to end on. Dr. Nii, thank you again for your time. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to hang up.
Okay.
All right. Thanks again, Dr. Nii. It's great information you shared with us today. You're such a personable individual. That,
I'm sorry about the coughing.
Nah.
Okay.
I was trying to figure out how to work that in, because there's this analogy. It's, the captain says, put on your own oxygen mask first before assisting others, and it's that element, I think, also as physicians, where you're taking care of people and everybody else. Where do you figure into that? And that's also part of the learning, is how do I put myself, put on my own oxygen mask first?
Yeah, you're right about that. And it's sometimes it scares me when me and Renee are like making episodes, and we really love doing episodes, but like we have to shut down for like who knows, right? Because sometimes this lasts like 2 weeks, and it just makes it really difficult for the editor to go in and anticipate when a cough is coming in, and so it's sometimes a little scary. Like, man, like it happened to her 2 weeks ago, where every time she would talk, it cough, 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 cough. So thank you for putting up with it. I hope it didn't ruin the experience.
Oh, no, it was totally fine. So minimal.
These are great questions. Great questions that you guys asked.
Did you and Renee do all of your shows together, or just sometimes? Or
we're getting to the point where now we're trying to make sure that every show, obviously discussions that are interview based with other doctors, usually it's just me, but there's a lot of